Morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, July 26th. The Response to Resistance Board is going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to introduce myself and have the rest of the board introduce themselves as well. I'm Tom Hackney, the Director of Personnel and Professional Standards, and I'll start at my very far left and let everybody introduce themselves.
Lieutenant Mark Dorner, FTO Office.
Assistant Chief Elizabeth Kenny, Zone Commander 2.
Lieutenant Brown, Professional Oversight.
Jackson Short, Chief of Professional Standards.
Very good. So each one of these cases has a floor lead, and for this particular case, it's going to be Lieutenant Brown. And I'm going to turn this over to him, and he will explain from there what we're doing.
Okay. So for the record, this is RTR case 17-0001. Today is July 26, 2019, and it is 9 a.m. So in this situation, we have an officer that was involved in a shooting that is no longer with the agency. In the interest of policy reviews, we're going to conduct this Response to Resistance Review Board to see if there are any gaps in our policy or see if there's anything that needs to be addressed. So here today we have Sergeant Cox, who will be testifying as a witness, and of course Detective Radigan, who will be presenting the presentation on behalf of the cold case unit, who is responsible for conducting the criminal investigation. So at this point, just a couple of preliminary things that I need to ask. Have both of you signed the sworn statement affidavit? Okay. And Sergeant Cox, have you signed the administrative proceeding rights form? Okay. So if you do this for me, if you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, thank you. Sergeant Cox, I'm going to turn this over to the Director for the rule of exclusion.
So since you are a witness in the case, I'm going to invoke the rule of exclusion, have you step out while the other testimony goes on, and then call you back in when it's time.
Before you leave, Sergeant Cox, I would like to read a couple of things just for the benefit of you and for the benefit of the public. I'm going to read the confidentiality notice. This hearing is confidential and it remains confidential until the case is closed. So based on the current state of law, these proceedings are considered confidential and are not subject to disclosure until they become public record. Therefore, anyone participating in these proceedings is prohibited from willfully disclosing any information obtained during this process, including the nature of the questions asked, any information revealed, or documents furnished in connection with these proceedings until they become public record. I'm also going to read the purpose of the Response to Resistance Review Board, which explains why we do this. The Response to Resistance Review Board conducts administrative reviews of incidents involving certain uses of force by members of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Now, these reviews are conducted to ensure adherence to agency policy and training, and consistent with state and federal law, the Sheriff's Office affords substantial deference for the instantaneous judgment and decision-making that must be made by law enforcement officers in certain situations. However, this deference does not permit any member to depart from agency policy, training, or professional standards of reasonableness. Since the ability to use force is such an extraordinary license given to law enforcement officers, the public looks to the Sheriff's Office to monitor and regulate these uses of force. And at today's hearing, this board will assess the appropriateness of the actions of all involved members based upon the facts and circumstances known to each member at the time of his or her decision to use force. Okay? All right, Sergeant Cox, so if you wouldn't mind just stepping out, we'll have you come in when we're ready for you to testify. Detective Radigan, if you could just formally state your name, your ID number, and your assignment on the date of this shooting and what you have prepared for us here today.
Detective Margaret Radigan, ID number 7024. I'm assigned to the Homicide Cold Case Unit, and I was currently assigned at this time of the shooting. And
with being the criminal investigator, you have completed a PowerPoint presentation that walks us through all of the facts and circumstances that you were able to ascertain through your investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind just walking us through that. I may stop you at any point in time to ask you a qualifying question. Otherwise, I'll probably hold any detailed questions for the end.
Yes, sir. All right, this is the officer involved incident that occurred at 8206 Phillips Highway on Sunday, the 1st of January 2017 at approximately 0212 hours. The officer involved is Officer D.E. Holly, Jr., ID number 5945. At the time, he was assigned to patrol Zone 3, Watch 4, Blue Squad. His date of employment was 9/20 of 1993. The summary of the incident. On Sunday, January 1st, 2017, Officer D.E. Holly, ID number 5945, was working security, off-duty employment for Pure Nightclub, which is located at 8206 Phillips Highway. The club closed at 0200 hours, and Officer Holly was in the parking lot of the business, assisting with the pedestrian and vehicular traffic coming from the club. As the vehicular traffic increased in the parking lot, a silver gray Dodge Charger was heard and seen accelerating, tires screeching in the parking lot. The Dodge struck a parked vehicle in the lot and was then seen veering toward Officer Holly, who was setting up traffic cones in the parking lot. The front end of the Dodge Charger struck Officer Holly. Officer Holly was momentarily pinned between a parked car and the front end of the Dodge Charger. The Charger then continued to travel east through the parking lot. Officer Holly unholstered his firearm and began to run after the vehicle. As Officer Holly caught up to the vehicle, he approached the driver's side window and gave verbal commands for the driver to stop. The driver was trying to regain control of the vehicle and continue to drive off. Officer Holly then observed the barrel and front sights of a rifle lying across the passenger seat of the vehicle, pointed in his direction. Officer Holly observed the driver make an abrupt turn towards the rifle. Officer Holly, in fear for his life, discharged his issued firearm at the driver. Officer Holly struck the vehicle twice, but the Charger continued to travel east through the parking lot. The Dodge Charger eventually came to a stop in the northeast corner of the parking lot when the driver was forced to stop due to traffic congestion. The suspect was taken into custody by Officer Holly. The suspect was not injured by the gunfire. Officer Holly received minor injuries from the impact with the suspect's vehicle. So the timeline of this incident, none of it was captured on a recorded JSO radio. It was a talk around because it was an off-duty employment, so we really didn't get anything until right after the shooting. So we're estimating the times at approximately 2:11 hours is when Officer Holly is struck by the suspect's vehicle. Approximately 2:12, the shots are fired, and around 2:15 we have recorded where 611 Sergeant J.D. Cox, ID number 67139, contacts dispatch.
HQ 611.
Sergeant Cox requests a TAC channel, additional units, and a lieutenant to respond to the nightclub.
10-4. Give me a TAC channel. Send me about 5 additional units of the Pier nightclub. Also start me a lieutenant.
So again, that's on radio transmissions that are recorded from the incident. We looked for surveillance video. Pure nightclub did have some. There's a small portion that's captured. It does not show the impact between the car and Officer Holly, but it does show the erratic driving of the suspect. And the car will come from this end of the video. And this is Officer Holly. He's dragging the traffic cones to set up the traffic pattern. You'll see the headlights first, and then the car. This is an aerial view of the nightclub, situated here, Bay Meadows Road and Phillips Highway. And these are scene photos from the night of the incident. Officer Holly's car. This is going to be the first vehicle that the Dodge Charger strikes. It's coming from this direction here. Strikes this vehicle. This is where Officer Holly was standing with the cones, and he will eventually get pinned between the front end of the car and this vehicle here.
Where exactly was he pinned? Just looking at the picture there of the SUV.
We're estimating probably right around in this area here. I guess he's got the traffic cones. As the car comes around, he's momentarily pinned, and then the car kind of veers to the left and through the parking lot. Travels east through the parking lot. The taillights here are the patrol cars because he gets caught up in traffic over here, and this is where he ends up. Back window was shot out, and then the front end damage from the impact with the vehicle. And right here you can see the finger marks where Officer Holly, when he gets pinned up or momentarily pinned, when he goes up on the hood. This is the rifle that Officer Holly sees through the driver's side window. And then this is the ET diagram. The evidence 1 and evidence 2 are the 40 millimeter casings that are found in the parking lot. And then you'll see the suspect's car. 1 will be one of the casings, and 2 is the second casing. Vehicle was towed to our JSO warehouse where we searched the vehicle and collected evidence, raw photographs of the damage. And this is the rear driver's side window where one round goes through. And that's with the door open looking out. Bullet travels through that window and goes into the driver's seat here. This is damage from just the glass fragments, and then a fragment of the round there. And we doweled it, show the trajectory. And it does not exit the seat. This is the glove box. There's a bullet hole here, causing the glove box to stay open. Fragment there. And best that we can say is it goes through the rear window and strikes right in there and gets that round. Our suspect is Cecil Evans. He's a black male, 8/8 of 87. At the time he was 29. He was active duty U.S. Navy, assigned to the Maryland Blue submarine, which is stationed at Kings Bay Naval Base. He was a yeoman in the Navy. We interviewed the suspect at the homicide office. This is a summary of the interview. Suspect Cecil Evans was interviewed at the JSO homicide office. Evans stated he arrived at Pure nightclub at around 2300 hours on 12/31/2016. He hung out with several friends. During the time in the club, Evans stated he had 2 shots of Patron tequila and a shot of some type of drink that was provided by the club to its patrons at midnight. Evans said he left the club by himself at around 0200 hours. As he was leaving in his Dodge Charger, he became impatient sitting in the parking lot traffic. Evans said he drove around a vehicle that was stopped in front of him. He drove to the right of the vehicle, traveling approximately 15 to 20 miles per hour. He said a short time later he heard gunshots, was removed from the vehicle by police, and then told he struck an officer with his car. Evans stated the rifle belonged to him, and he had recently purchased the rifle from a pawn shop in Kings Bay, Georgia. Evans stated he usually keeps his rifle in the car. He had it in the backseat of the Dodge Charger covered by a black jacket. When he was leaving the club, he put the rifle in the front seat of the vehicle. Evans continued to deny striking the officer and crashing into parked vehicles that evening, even when shown photographs of the damaged vehicles.
So, Detective, he denied actually taking his vehicle and striking the other vehicle, even though we have part of it captured on surveillance video, and we, of course, have the damage to the other vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Was he intoxicated when you interviewed him?
No.
Okay.
There was no signs of impairment.
Okay. As he answered your questions, did he ever allude to the fact that he saw the officer there on the side of his vehicle, giving him commands to stop or anything at all? Did he go into any detail at all about his interaction with the officer?
No, just that he was stopped in traffic and then they were pulling him out of the vehicle.
Okay.
Again, our suspect, he was charged with, his criminal history showed misdemeanor traffic offenses from Michigan. That night, he was charged with aggravated assault on a Leo with a deadly weapon being the vehicle. On 3/22/2017, the charges were reduced to reckless driving, leaving the scene of a crash with unattended property damage. On 5/31/2017, Cecil Evans pled nolo contendere, 6 months probation.
So he pleaded no contest to assaulting a police officer.
That's correct. The ATF firearms trace summary on the rifle shows it's a Century Arms International, model AK-63D Delta, caliber .762, serial number 63 Delta, Papa Mike 02511. Firearm was originally purchased in Kingsland, Georgia in August 2016 by Dustin Blessing. Cecil Evans purchased the firearm in December of 2016. This is the suspect's rifle. And he had a magazine with 22 live .762 rounds, nothing in the chamber. Officer Holly's weapon inventory shows a Glock Model 22 serial number 40 caliber, 1 live round in the chamber, and the magazine contained 12 live rounds. There were 2 shots fired. Officer Holly complained of some injury to his finger. They were photographed. He had some soft tissue injury.
Were those the extent of the injuries to Officer Holly?
Yes.
Okay. Did he complain of any injury resulting from the car pinning him into the SUV at all?
He later complained of some soreness to his knee.
Okay.
And then Officer Holly's statement reads as follows.
And so before you do that, obviously, just for the benefit of the public, so Officer Holly's retired. We requested that he come and testify. He was willing to do so. However, was sent out on a lengthy military deployment. In the interest of our moving a case forward that has already kind of been in the wings for nearly 2.5 years, we elected to go and have this hearing so that we could review everything that happened that night and see if there's any sort of, again, gaps in our training or policy that we need to address. So if you don't mind, just read his statement. This will be the perspective of Officer Holly. And any questions we're going to have, if they can be answered, would be answered by Sergeant Cox.
On 1/1/17 at 0215, I was working off-duty security at Club Pure. The club was closed as of 0200, and I was continuing to assist with the closing operations. While moving orange traffic cones located in the front of the club used to block off parking spaces, I heard a loud screech of vehicle tires. As I turned towards the sound, I observed the suspect's vehicle smash into a parked vehicle at a high rate of speed. The vehicle the suspect struck was parked approximately 3 spots away from the parking stall where I was standing. After hitting the parked vehicle, the suspect veered directly towards me and was decelerating slightly from the impact with the parked vehicle. I attempted to back up quickly onto the nearby front curb of the building, but was struck by the suspect's vehicle. I braced myself against the hood of the vehicle and was knocked backwards into a parked vehicle. I became pinned from the knees down, but as the suspect vehicle turned, I became free and was able to move. I unholstered my weapon and ran towards the suspect vehicle. Once I caught up, I ran up to the driver's side window and gave verbal commands for the suspect to stop. The suspect would not stop and was trying to regain control and continue driving. As I gave the driver commands, I observed the barrel and front sight of a long rifle laying across the passenger seat, with the barrel aimed up in my direction across the center console. The suspect abruptly turned his body towards the weapon and took his hands off the steering wheel. I was still able to see down the barrel of the gun when he turned. I feared for my life and began firing down into the vehicle at the suspect. I immediately stopped firing as the vehicle moved away from me. The vehicle continued forward but stopped at the stalled traffic in front of him. I ran towards the rear of the vehicle to use it for cover. I yelled loud verbal commands for the suspect to stop and get out of the vehicle. The driver's side door opened and the suspect began to exit with his hands in the air. I ran from the rear of the vehicle and ordered the suspect to the ground. I placed him in handcuffs and yelled for the other officers to secure the vehicle. After restraining the suspect, I assisted with securing the scene. I noticed that both of my knees were aching and my left index finger was scratched and swollen due to being jammed while absorbing the impact of the hood of the suspect's vehicle. I also could feel stinging in my right knee from an abrasion through my long thermal underwear, which now had a hole torn in the knee. Signed by D.E. Holly, Jr., ID number 5945.
Okay, thank you, Detective. I have no questions. Lieutenant Dorner?
I have none.
Assistant Chief Kenny?
No questions.
Chief Short?
Were there any civilian witnesses?
No.
That's all.
Follow up to that, I saw in the surveillance video there were a number of civilians that were out in the parking lot. You're saying none of them elected to participate or help in any way this investigation?
That's my understanding. When we got there, there was none there.
Okay, thank you. Director Hack?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. If you just stand by in case we need any clarification on any of the details, Detective. All right, so we'll have Sergeant Cox come in now. All right, Sergeant, yeah, if you just have a seat there, just name, ID number, and your assignment on the night of this incident. I know you were off duty, but just what your responsibilities were that night.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm Sergeant J.D. Cox, ID 67139. I'm currently assigned to the burglary unit. However, at this time of the incident, I was assigned to Zone 5 Patrol. On January 1st, 2017.
Hold on just a sec. Before you go into that, so I want to kind of walk us through what you were doing there. You had, obviously, this was an off-duty assignment. The club hired you for security purposes, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Were you the scheduler that night, or were you just in charge of the officers?
I was just in charge of the officers assigned. I didn't schedule it. I believe, I'm not sure who scheduled it.
Okay. Sergeant, you were standing outside when this incident occurred, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is kind of a unique hearing because Officer Holly is unable to attend due to his military deployment. He's retired, so he's not required to anyway. So we're going to just ask you basic questions on what you observed. We have his statement, so we rely on that as his testimony. What we like to do first is get your perspective from that night. You know, of course, as the Supreme Court has explained, we are not under any responsibility for facts and circumstances that we've learned after an officer-involved incident, but we're only responsible for reacting to what we know at the time. So what I'd like to do, Sergeant, is from your perspective and your observations that night, walk us through everything as it was happening so that we have a really good picture painted as to, you know, how quickly things happened, how dynamic the situation was.
Yes, sir. So, as you can observe, this is the nightclub. It's a nightclub area. Several parking spots here where it was full. It was New Year's. Several parking spots here full, all on the sides. And also, people were parked over in this area as well. So we had officers patrolling in all these areas. I prepared something to write to help me recollect what happened. I can read that, or I can just briefly just show you on
Sure.
here.
You can read what you've prepared, and I'll probably ask you some follow-up. And I'm also going to ask you to view with us the surveillance video and just kind of walk us through what's happening each frame. So.
Yes, sir. Okay, as I was saying, I'm currently assigned to the burglary unit, and I was assigned in Zone 5 Patrol when this incident took place. It was January 1st, 2017, New Year's Day, and I was working in an off-duty capacity. I was the supervisor in charge of the units assigned to work at Pier Nightclub, which is located, as you can see, at 8206 Phillips Highway. Due to the large number of people in attendance, which was possibly anywhere from 300 to 400 people, officers were deployed not only in the main parking lot where the incident occurred, that has at least 100 parking spots, but also around the shopping complex where hundreds of parking spots are located. This is not my first time working at this venue, as I have worked it several times along with Officer Holly. It should be noted that prior to this meeting, I returned to the incident location and physically walked, from the best of my recollection, my location at the time of the incident to where Officer Holly was located at the time he was struck by the vehicle. The distance was approximately 30 feet between my location and his location. At the time of the incident, around 0200 hours, the club was closing and the flow of people leaving was steady, with several hundred people leaving the club headed to their vehicles. As patrons are leaving the venue, headed to their vehicles, I observed the suspect vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed. Within a matter of seconds, the speeding vehicle then crashed into a parked vehicle, at which time the vehicle did not stop, but continued driving in the direction of Officer Holly. The vehicle driver did not change his direction, his driving pattern, or stop the vehicle. Instead, he continued driving, running over Officer Holly. Due to the suspect not stopping or even changing his direction of travel, after seeing Officer Holly in full uniform, which he had ample time to do, I believe the suspect's intention was to run over Officer Holly. Upon seeing Officer Holly being struck by the vehicle, from my view, it appeared as if Officer Holly was completely ran over as he disappeared from my sight. I believed him to be under the vehicle, and due to the high rate of speed and impact, I believed him to be deceased. The vehicle then continued to drive away in an attempt to leave the parking lot, placing immediate and imminent threat to the public at large. At this point, I observed Officer Holly up and running after the vehicle. As I observed the vehicle, I then heard at least 2 shots. I then returned to my vehicle to pursue the vehicle, as I was aware it was imperative to stop the driver. In addition, I was to request additional units and advise HQ of the incident. Due to the suspect's action at this time, he had committed hit and run with property damage, as well as aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer. In the event a vehicle pursuit ensued, I intended to use force up to and including deadly force if needed to apprehend or stop the suspect. Due to the actions and committed offenses of the suspect, in addition to the amount of patrons in the parking lot and the immediate area, I believed it was necessary to use such force to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to other individuals in the parking lot and roadway, as well as to prevent his escape. In my training and experience, actions such as these taken by the suspect, where he has shown deliberate disregard for property and human life, if not immediately apprehended, he would have placed another law enforcement officer or any other person in imminent danger or death or great bodily harm. Within the matter of seconds from the time I observed the vehicle speeding to the time I observed the vehicle stopped due to traffic congestion and the suspect in custody, I contacted HQ and requested additional resources. It should be noted that I did not discharge my firearm due to my vantage point and angle between me and the fleeing suspect vehicle. With the circumstances presented to me, I was not in position to discharge my firearm at the vehicle due to patrons between me and the suspect vehicle. Once additional units arrived and the situation was stabilized, I stood by until relieved.
Okay, so to sum up, you saw the vehicle strike Officer Hawley. You obviously didn't know the intent of the driver, whether he was intoxicated or not, but you saw that the vehicle struck him, pinned him up against an SUV, and then drive off despite commands to stop. And then you observed Officer Hawley approach the vehicle and demand that the officer stop, and then you heard or saw the shots, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do this. We're going to play the surveillance video. Have you seen this before?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay, so just walk us through this video corresponding with the series of events that you just read about.
Okay, I believe this is at the end of the night. The club, at 2:13, so the club had been closed about 13 minutes.
And where are you at in the video?
Right there.
Thank you.
People had already began leaving. As you can see, some of the parking spots are empty. That's the vehicle.
Right. And so at this point, you're seeing him pin Officer Hawley up against the SUV?
I can't exactly say. Well, yeah, I saw. That's when he went over and hit Officer Holly, and I started going towards him. I can't exactly say when it. I can't exactly say when that was. He hit him, but yeah, that's the.
Okay,
time
so
frame.
you start running at that point when you're running. Is the vehicle mobile again, or is the vehicle still there stationary?
I believe when I started running is when he hit Officer Holly.
Okay, and then he drove off to speed out of the parking lot. We obviously know that he wasn't able to do so because there was traffic at the end of the parking lot. How far away were you from Holly whenever he discharged his firearm?
I have no idea.
Were you able to see it clearly?
No, I didn't see Officer Holly. I didn't see the shots being fired. I heard them. I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
At that time, I couldn't tell you if it was Officer Holly or whoever. I didn't know who.
Got it. Okay.
Fired 2 shots.
All right. So you alluded to this in your statement, but from the perspective that the reasonable person perspective, your observation there, do you believe that there was justification to use deadly force against the person who acted in this manner? The person that ended up hitting what we call Officer Hawley, the suspect, driving that vehicle into him, not knowing if it's accidental or intentional, but seeing his lack of response. From your perspective, Sergeant Cox, was the decision to use lethal force justified?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Why would you say that?
Because of the suspect's actions, he ran over an individual. He hit a parked vehicle. Okay, he doesn't know if anyone's in there or not. But then he, to me, deliberately ran over even if it wasn't a police officer. It could have been just a patron, someone leaving the club. He ran them over completely, continued driving, didn't slow down at all until he had no choice, apparently, but to stop because he couldn't get out of the driving pattern. If he'd have been able to, because people, as I showed in the parking, and the lot, people are parked all around that club. If he'd have been able to continue on, there's no telling how many people he would have ran over and just kept going.
So from your perspective, would you say that the suspect showed a complete disregard for human life?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. I have no further questions, Lieutenant Dorner.
Sergeant Cox, how many people do you think were outside, patrons, while this is going on, just in your estimate?
Several hundred.
No more questions.
Assistant Chief Kenny.
Sergeant Cox, Were you able to talk to the suspect at all?
No, ma'am.
So did you notice, when you saw the suspect move around out of the car or anything, did you notice any signs of impairment or anything?
No, ma'am. When I observed him, he was on the ground.
Okay. And did you see the vehicle prior to striking the parked vehicle or the officer?
Yes, ma'am. I saw him when I saw him speeding through. When I initially saw him speeding through the parking lot, he hadn't hit a vehicle yet.
No further questions.
Chief Short,
No questions?
Director Hackney?
Once you saw who the suspect was, did you then know that you'd seen him there at the club before? Did you recognize him at all or anything?
No, sir. I have no idea who he was. That when I saw him on the ground, it's the first time that I can remember ever seeing him before.
No further questions.
Okay, so we'll just have you stay there since we don't have a principal to call to the table. I'll turn this over to Director Hackney for our executive session, and he'll kind of explain what that is.
Yeah. So,
Yes, sir.
So at this point in time, we'll go into what we call our executive session, where the members of the board will have a minute to talk amongst ourselves before we render a decision. We'll also seek input from the academy staff, the firing range, and the general counsel's office. At which time I'm going to go ahead and do that now, see if that'll initiate some conversation. So I'll start with the firing range.
No, sir, everything appeared to be within policy.
And go to the academy. Anything?
Yes, sir, everything was within policy.
Since the officer is not here any longer, is there anything tactics or training wise that you see from a larger standpoint that could affect the agency that we need to discuss or?
No, in this situation, it was a rapidly evolving situation, and due to limited video we see here on the screen that's presented, we're speculating the time that he had to possibly move out of the way or react before the vehicle actually struck him. And with the vehicle moving rapidly, dynamic situation evolving, again, and the threat that was present for human life, I believe the actions taken by the officer were justified in the correct actions.
So Sergeant, after the striking of the officer, there has to be at some point a determination as to whether or not this is a true accident or if it's somebody that does show disregard for human life. And correct me if I'm wrong, but after the suspect then attempts to drive off and you now have commands for him to stop, but he's disregarding those, at that point, it's certainly reasonable to assume that he does have a desire to either end human life or do great serious bodily harm.
Correct, and it is our responsibility to first of all protect the public at large. And as it was stated, there were mass amounts of people in the parking lot patrons trying to exit and leave the establishment safely, as well as other officers in that parking lot. And so there was a grave concern for human life overall, and the ability to get the suspect stopped.
All right, so before we leave the academy or the range, anybody on the board have any comments or questions for either of the board? Anyone? No, sir. Okay. Moving to the general counsel's office, anything that you see from your standpoint?
In light of the presentation, the actions of the officer was reasonable and inconsistent with 11th Circuit case law.
Very good. Anybody have questions for the general counsel? Okay. All right. Yeah, there is one thing, Detective Radigan, if you can real quickly pull up the aerial photograph. Just for clarification, as I watched the presentation, it seems like Bay Meadows and Phillips Highway may be incorrectly marked on that?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. I just wanted, since that's going into the record, I want to put it out on the record that on that particular slide, what is diagrammed as Bay Meadows Road is actually Phillips Highway, and then Phillips Highway is actually Bay Meadows Road. Yeah, I think it's an unusual circumstance for us to not have the officer testify, but I think the evidence at the scene is clear. His statement reflects it, and Sergeant Cox's testimony helps that. So,
The video speaks.
yeah, it's further based on the driver's actions. So,
I think at the point at which the vehicle leaves, that's where you have the clear ability to use deadly force, and it's certainly reasonable that Officer Holly used it.
But let's don't forget, he didn't use deadly force because of a hit and run with injuries, which would not be one of the reasons to use deadly force. He used deadly force because the suspect reached for the weapon.
right.
So you have a suspect that's disregarding commands. You have a weapon that he's turning towards. All of that absolutely easily adds up to justifying deadly force.
I mean, the simple fact that he reached for the weapon, that period, you could take out anything else to do with it. Had he seen him, gave commands, and he turned towards that firearm,
Right.
That-
I just feel like because he wasn't here, there was more discussion on the hit and run with injuries than there was the reaching for the firearm, so that kind of got glossed over.
and the scene photographs clearly show that barrel in the position in which he described it. Anybody turning towards that would cause that reasonable officer to want to use deadly force to protect themselves.
Just so you know, I couldn't see that, the firearm. That's the reason that I didn't mention it. I didn't see it until the vehicle stopped, and at the end I saw it sitting there.
Yeah, you wouldn't have had that vantage point that he
Right,
would have
sir.
had right there at the car.
Right, so I think
Yes,
that even says a lot more. You didn't see the firearm, and yet you yourself, had you been in the proper position, could have justified using deadly force.
Yes, sir.
And so when you combine that with Officer Holly's observation of the suspect turning towards, reaching for the firearm, that just is an enhancer.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments from the board before we really move towards voting?
And Director, we only need to vote on the top box as well.
Yeah, so we typically, for these, we answer 3 questions that go to the sheriff, and the sheriff makes the final recommendation, or we make a recommendation to the sheriff who makes the final decision in the case. Those 3 questions typically are, was a member's use of force within departmental policy? Does a member need any additional situational training? And should the case be referred to internal affairs before any further investigation due to the fact that he's currently retired? Question number 2 and number 3 does not pertain to him, so that we won't answer that. So as we poll the board here in just a second, the only one question that I'll ask is, was a member's use of force within departmental policy, leaving a yes or no? So unless there's more to discuss from the board, ready to vote, I'll start from my very far left. We'll vote there and move along. So was a member's use of force within departmental policy?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
I also vote yes. So the other 2 questions are not relevant. And so this will be sent as a recommendation to the sheriff, and his final decision will be made. I appreciate your time and preparation for coming out today.
Yes, sir.
Any thoughts or comments from you for the board?
No, sir. I appreciate it.
9:37, this board is concluded.